there's one thing I know about this guy right here is that he's an absolute sicko. And he might be making more moves ahead of the NBA trade deadline that's coming up in, literally 24 hours from right now. We're going to break it down on today's edition of Celtics Today by Chat Sports. My name is Tyler Smith, and league insiders are reporting that Boston has more moves up their sleeve here in the coming hours and days, potentially, with the buyout market looming large as well. Robb of MassLive saying the following. League sources tell MassLive that Boston is expected to remain active even after completing the deal for Nikola Vucevic. Here we go. Now, are there going to be any crazy moves, any blockbuster moves? I'm not so sure. We're going to explore that possibility in just a moment. But first, make sure you go down below and hit that thumbs up icon. Like today's video, because if you want the Celtics to make another big move, manifest it for me. Make it known and hit that thumbs up icon like today's show. All right, so in terms of moves that Boston could be making here in the near future, there are still some things around the margins that need to be sorted out because there's a player in Boston's roster that really hasn't seen much action so far this year, only appearing in 8 games, and that's Khris Boucher. A trade is more likely than not coming for Khris Boucher. He's currently out of the lineup due to personal reasons, the same thing that was the case for Anfernee Simons for the past few days. And according to Robb, he, quote, remains a likely candidate to be dealt. Now, 33 years old, not really putting up many impactful statistics this season. He doesn't have much trade value around the league. So in all likelihood, it's going to be for something along the lines of another vet minimum player or just a second-round pick or something like that, maybe even cash just to get rid of him off of Boston's books. There are reports as well that the 76ers have some trade interest in Boucher as well as some other teams around the league. So Boston's certainly going to be working the phones here in the next day or so. Now, in terms of where the Boston Celtics want to get, this has been a thing that's been looming large over this team's head ever since the new ownership group came in, right? The Celtics and their luxury tax penalties. Well, Brad Stevens has done a lot of good business to get that number all the way down to about $17 million in penalties after the season. The Nikola Vucevic move shed off $22 million in repeater tax penalties. Bill Chisholm certainly smiled at that. And now that leaves Boston under the first apron and only $5.9 million away from the luxury tax. Something that seems pretty realistic now given the circumstances of where we are after all these trades. Robb expanded on it more by saying this. Boston would need to do a more than just move a couple minimum salaries to dip under the tax. A player who is part of Boston's rotation in some form would likely have to be moved. In theory, Vucevic could be used to further reduce the payroll if he's rerouted to another team for a smaller salary in a separate deal or if a trade is expanded. For now, he looks like a way for them to bolster their depth in the front court. Okay, so I get it. But at the same time, I wouldn't totally rule out Brad Stevens expanding upon this deal because it's not even just one deal. As a matter of fact, there's actually 2 deals going on between the Celtics and the Bulls here. So I wouldn't count out Brad Stevens expanding upon that even more. The trade is not finalized until Thursday, so they still have time to make more calls and get more teams involved if they want to make this thing bigger and benefit both of the teams that go on here. Because the Celtics really maneuvered this trade very, very methodically. They went and did 2 separate deals. This isn't a one-for-one trade that's going on. Like if you look at the transaction log, it's going to end up being 2 separate trades. And trade number 1 is the Celtics getting Nikola Vucevic for this Bulls second round, or for the Celtics second round pick that they possessed that gives the most favorable pick this year in the second round of the New Orleans Pelicans, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Knicks, or the Trailblazers. And I would assume that pick's going to be New Orleans, considering they're one of the worst teams in the league. It's a pretty valuable second-round pick, I'd say. We didn't know where and when the pick would be had when we first heard of this trade, but now we know, and it's going to be something around the pick 31 to 35. The Pelicans are one of the 4 worst teams in all of basketball, so a pretty valuable pick there in a pretty good draft. And then the Celtics, on the other hand, they trade Anfernee Simons to the Bulls just for that 2027 Denver second-round pick, which clearly is not going to be as valuable as a Pelicans second in this upcoming draft. So they made 2 deals here, and what that did was it created a $27.7 million trade exception. The Celtics ended up trading Anfernee Simons into the Kristaps Porzingis trade player exception. Excuse me, I have that mixed up. They did that with Nikola Vucevic because he makes just under the $22 million that the Celtics had freed up with that TPE. Now they have an even bigger one. As a matter of fact, this trade exception is the second biggest in all of basketball at this point. So much flexibility is now had for the Celtics to make another deal that closely resembles this one, perhaps. Also, they are way more flexible than they were prior. This trade puts the Celtics underneath the first apron, and you'd think, you're still in the aprons or you're still in the luxury tax, you don't have that much freedom, right? Well, they actually do have a lot more flexibility to make deals down the line, not only in these next 2 days or in the buyout market, but also this summer if they want to improve the roster greatly. They can now take back more salary in a trade than they send out. There are a very few NBA teams that can say that they can do that right now. They can also use the full mid-level exception, so that's something that's down the line this summer. But it's going to be something around the lines of a $15 million deal. Yeah. And in today's NBA with the CBA going on, guys aren't getting these $20 to $25 million dollar deals in free agency. It's either you get a vet minimum or something low, you get a taxpayer mid-level exception, you get a biannual deal, or you'll get like a full mid-level exception like this, or you'll end up signing an extension with your team or something like that where you can actually get the big bucks. Nobody has real money to throw these big-time contracts at guys on the open market. But speaking of the open market, the Celtics can now sign anybody from the buyout market, regardless of how much they were making prior. And I mentioned it was something along the lines of like $10 million was that threshold yesterday. It's actually $14 million. So if somebody had a greater than $14 million salary and he gets bought out, there's a good handful of teams, whoever's above the first and second aprons, that can't sign that player. Boston now can, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. So knowing that what we all know now in terms of the flexibility that Boston has and the trade exception that they generated and the financial burden that was lifted by making this deal and cutting some salary, grade the Celtics-Bulls trades for Boston. I also believe that Nikola Vucevic is going to be a good addition and a good fit to the Celtics team. He's a great passing big. He can rebound the basketball, and he's just a smart player who wants to win. So with that being said, grade the Celtics-Bulls trades for Boston for me down in the comment section. A, B, C, D, or F. Okay, so I want to mention this first before we move on because this is a business, but there is a human nature to it all. And that's what Jaylen Brown actually said about Anfernee Simons getting dealt. This trade kind of hit hard for his Celtics teammates. Baylor Shireman, who sits next to Anfernee Simons on the team playing, posted his little Coca-Cola that he had drinking there, and he was sad to see that his guy wasn't on the team playing with him. Jaylen Brown said, all the respect in the world goes to Anfernee Simons here. He helped us win a lot of games. There's a human element to this. Peyton Pritchard also made comments. Luka Garza made comments in support of Anfernee Simons. So clearly he was well liked by this group. Hopefully the same goes for a guy like Nikola Vucevic. Now, coming up next, how do the Celtics dodge the luxury tax? Because we alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I want to get into the brass tacks and specifics of how that gets done now. And then some buyout targets? Yeah, because I think the Celtics are probably going to be more active in that regard based on this not being so likely. I'll tell you what it is in a moment. First, I got to tell you guys about our sponsor on today's show. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and it's the last chance to get in on the football action this season with Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. Close out the season right with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. All you guys got to do is pick 2 to 6 players and just pick more or less on their projected stats, and you can win up to 2,000 times your money with the best daily fantasy sports app in the game. It's the best because they offer the best features, like a brand new one called Early Payouts. So if your player or your lineup gets off to a hot start, you'll now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. It's also easy to find your community on Prize Picks as well, where you can copy other players' lineups, celebrities, friends, creators, just like me, and put them in your own lineup. It's super, super simple, just a few taps. Another awesome feature that they have is making it easier for you guys to win real money in real time when they offer 99% off max discounts. And they're doing one for the big game with our guy, Drake May. All he's got to do is throw for 1 passing yard. That's it. And that square is greened out on your Prize Picks. So take advantage of that deal and download the Prize Picks app today and use that code CLNS, like you see in the bottom right of your screen, to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right, and all that information is clickable down in the comment section and description of today's video. Okay, it's unfortunate, but the reality of the situation is this. If the Celtics want to dip under the luxury tax, like Robb alluded to, somebody is going to need to be dealt from the rotation. And I don't think it's going to be Peyton Pritchard with having so many more years on his contract. At $7-8 million, it's one of the best values in all of basketball. I don't anticipate it being one of Jaylen Brown or Derek White. So the only other guy that makes decent enough money to get a deal like that done is Sam Hauser. He would be the guy that needs to be traded. But why would you trade Sam Hauser? He played 15 games in January. He put up 14 points a night, 5 boards almost. Really, really good efficiencies, especially from long range, 45% from deep, and he was shooting them at volume, 8.1 threes a game. In one of those games, he took 21 of them, and he hit 10. It makes really no sense to me to trade a guy like Sam Hauser, putting up those types of numbers. He has been streaky this year. He's had some months where he's been pretty off and hasn't had the greatest start to February so far. But we know this guy to be a switchable defender, a smart basketball player, can move off the ball really well. When Jayson Tatum returns, Sam Hauser takes it to the next level, and he only makes $10 million. His value to this roster far outweighs just getting rid of some luxury tax penalties and making a billionaire, a little more rich by not having to pay $17 million in tax penalties. Like, Sam Hauser's value to this team in winning basketball games and pursuing a championship is way bigger of a value than just trading him off to save some money. Makes no sense at all to me. So the real reality of the situation is this. The Celtics may find somebody who could fill, the holes they have on their roster with this Khris Boucher trade, or maybe they trade Xavier Tillman or something like that and find a end of bench guy that they could try to, reclaim and bring some talent to on their roster. That's probably a little bit unlikely, in my opinion. What's more likely is that the Celtics fill the holes and the gaps they have on the roster in the buyout market. Now, in losing Anfernee Simons, you lose a ball handler, which it wasn't the best, most high usage ball handler on the team. He was running off the ball a good bit, but he also got buckets. So what you're going to need is a backup ball handler and a bench scorer. Now, to be fair, when Jayson Tatum returns, he's going to take care of a lot of the ball handling responsibilities. And he's going to take care of a lot of the scoring punch that Anfernee Simons is leaving here. But you still need some level of depth. Somebody who can go get you a bucket off of the bench. Or at least calm things down and be that backup ball handler when Pritchard and White aren't necessarily taking the best care of the basketball. Now, in terms of the buyout market, because that's where we're going to need to be looking here, there's a couple of names that we're going to talk about in a moment. First one is going to be Mike Conley. Chris Haynes tweeting out the following, saying veteran guard Mike Conley Jr. isn't expected to stick with the Bulls. Both sides will work on proper path to move forward. Conley would be a target for a team in need of point guard depth. Suddenly, the Celtics are one of those teams in need of point guard depth. But is Mike Conley the best course of action to go after here? I mean, he literally cannot get on the floor in Minnesota. It's unfortunate, man, because I like Mike Conley a lot. And honestly, last season, he was good. He shot 41% from 3. He was putting in 5 assists a night. He played in the playoffs for them in some pretty good minutes. And he was only playing 25 minutes a game. Now he can't even see the floor, and it's been bad when he's been out there, man. 4.6 a night, only 3 assists, 32% from the field. Can't have it. And look, I get it. He's a smart player. But I don't want to waste that opportunity when there could be better options out there. I will say we're going to keep Mike Conley on the docket here. We're going to pencil him in for our list of guys. But is he the best overall option when there could potentially be more names looming? We don't know exactly who that's going to be yet, but we have some good ideas as to what could be possible in terms of guys getting bought out. So for some other buyout candidates that we have, I think my number one guy, and the reason that I brought up Mike Conley first was because it kind of seems guaranteed that he's going to end up getting bought out by the Bulls. Nobody's going to trade for him here, so he's going to get bought out by Chicago. But none of these names here are guaranteed to get bought out. They are fairly likely, but we're not going to use a pen for that yet. CJ McCollum, though, he would be the number one name I'd be looking at in terms of guys who can handle the rock and get buckets. I mean, flipping Anfernee Simons for Nikola Vucevic and then adding CJ McCollum, I mean, that would be unbelievable. I'd be all over making that move. Khris Middleton can't move anymore. Not in favor of that. Kevin Love don't really think he fits what the Celtics need right now in terms of roster building. We'll see. Draymond Green, I should have put an asterisk next to because this is only in the event that he is traded to another team, whether it's Milwaukee in a Giannis trade or somewhere else where he gets rerouted and that team ends up buying him out. He's a possibility. And the use of Nurkic, I mean, I feel like after bringing in Vooch, like, doesn't really make much sense to bring in another guy in Nurkic when you have Keita, you have Garza, who, by the way, absolutely dynamite against the Mavericks on Tuesday. So those are some 5 names that could be likely options. I'd go with McCollum first. But I wouldn't be out completely on Mike Conley. Maybe he just needs a little bit of a change of scenery, and Boston's a good place to do that. Complete the team for me down in the comment section before we get out of here on today's show. Name a player you want the Celtics to add this season, whether it's a trade before the deadline or somebody in the buyout market. Who is that name for you? Comment down below. As that will do it for today's show. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel, youtube.com/CelticsTV for the latest and greatest on your C's all season long. And give me a follow over on Twitter as well, at Tyler J. Smith, 2 H's because the name's common, but I am not. We'll see you guys next time. And as always, let's go C's.